William and I were ordered to meet Captain Alona on the bridge at 8 a.m. sharp for our next mission. The meeting was short, but the task was thought to be impossible. Oni was ordering us to locate and retrieve a lost asset of theirs, a Spartan. A Spartan 3, to be precise. We were ordered to bring him in, dead or alive. William and I glanced at each other when the Oni agent said that. Then we were told who the Spartan was. The Horseman of War. They didn't even give us his actual name, though we had heard the legend about him. To Oni, the Horseman only had one goal. It was to kill Covenant. But William and I knew better. They said that since February of that year, 2554, Oni had no contact with him and couldn't seem to properly track him down. Oni couldn't pinpoint his position because not only did he disable the tracking in his Mjolnir, but he was like a ghost. Every battlefield he may have been spotted on was destroyed, left dead and silent by the time any Oni personnel would reach it. They knew he was still alive because he had been spotted by some civilians. Story goes that those civilians were on a hike through one of the mountains of the human colony world of Forseti. They were about halfway up this mountain when they spotted a large figure moving towards their trail from below them in the mountain's forest. They, at first, thought it might be something like a brute, and they froze in place, filled with fear. Though as the figure grew closer, they recognized the distinct Mjolnir armor, and they figured it was a Spartan from the stories and propaganda they had heard. The horsemen met the trail ahead of them, and the civilians tried calling out to him, but he ignored them, deciding to move further up and into the mountains. As the horseman was walking off into the mountains, the civilians attempted to capture an image of him, but it came out a bit blurry. Oni caught wind of this and immediately sent personnel to investigate. But he was long gone by then. Hell, they even told us that some of the agents went missing. So, they decided what better way to hunt a Spartan than sending Spartans after him. They told us it wouldn't be easy, and that we would only have about 5 months trying to find him before they would ultimately put a bounty on his head if he wasn't found. He was already considered AWOL and a fugitive. William and I got to work immediately. William and I had been covering the places he'd been spotted, even getting to talk to the people who had spotted him in that mountain, and just generally collecting any kind of intel we could find. Oh, and we found quite a bit of intel. More on that in a bit, though. It was difficult to find a proper pattern that he was following. He seemed to just appear in random places when he was spotted by civilians or drones. It wasn't until we decided to scan Covenant radio channels that we found something interesting. Every single Covenant force that had been attacked by the Horsemen sent out a distress signal asking for reinforcements. Every single one received some form of reinforcements, varying from large to small, with no other signals detected after they were sent. The battlefields were left in shambles, with no living beings alive. But this is how we found him. We decided to scan and monitor any Covenant desperately calling for reinforcements. It did take a few days to get anything, though. We went right to the first one we heard, and what we found was a scene out of a fucking horror story. We went to one of Jewel and Dama's Covenant docking yards, and from atmosphere alone, you could see the devastation. We thought we were in the wrong place at first because it looked like a UNSC frigate had blown craters into this docking yard. But as we got closer, we could see one lone Spartan standing in the middle of this destroyed docking yard. Covenant bodies lined the ground. Every single Phantom and Banshee crashed into the ground, and one Lich they had was cut in half. The Corvette that was docked there was completely destroyed. Every single engine was blown out, and it was crashed on the far side of the docking yard. The body of what we assumed was the shipmaster was right in front of this Spartan, laying on the ground. As we brought the Pelican down about 300 feet behind the Spartan to land, we saw him kneel down to the body. William and I walked out of the Pelican and told the pilot to keep the engines warm and began approaching this Spartan. 300 feet to 280 to 265 to 250 feet, then we stopped. As I was looking around, the bodies of some in the Covenant were almost unrecognizable. I saw one elite's arm ripped off of its body and shoved down the throat of another elite. Grunts' bodies were splattered against walls so hard they looked fused to the wall. Jackals in pieces and some impaled on a makeshift spikes like kebabs. This was insanely brutal, even for the things William and I have seen and done. The Spartan stood up, facing away from us, with the head of the elite shipmaster in his right hand, and was holding the body by its chest plate in his left prosthetic hand. William and I looked at each other. And then William gestured his hand to go talk to him. We talked over comms so that the horseman wouldn't hear what we said.
What? You want me to go talk to him?
William nodded and said, yeah.
Okay. Let me get this straight. You're the higher rank here and you want me to do it.
William then pulled some bullshit card and said, would you like to vote on it? I just stared at him in my helmet with the most I fucking hate you face that I could possibly make. William gestured his hand the same way, and I begrudgingly started walking towards the horseman. I only walked 50 more feet before stopping and calling out to him.
I can't believe this. Spartan, we know who you are, and we're just here to bring you back to the UNSC.
He didn't answer, and I looked back at William and shrugged. When I looked back at him, he was still facing away from me, but his head was partially turned towards me. I called out one more time, which was a fucking mistake. In the middle of me saying, we are here to help you, He threw the body of the shipmaster at me with breakneck speed, and as I went to duck under the body, I saw the horseman's feet in front of me. He bridged the 200-foot gap in a split second. I went to block, and he proceeded to kick me all the way back to the front of the Pelican. I slid on the ground past the cockpit, and the pilot stood up out of her seat in confusion. I quickly got back up, shaking off the hit, and sprinted back to the rear of the Pelican, where I saw William dodging all of the horseman's kicks and punches. William couldn't get any room to breathe. He had to put all of his effort into not getting hit or face the consequences of going flying as I did. Just when I was going to call out, the horseman swung with a left kick at William. William blocked it, but slid a good 20 feet. I yelled at the Spartan,
"Hey, you overgrown Sasquatch!"
which prompted him to turn around and rush me again. This time I was prepared. Right when he got close, I dodged and got behind him. I threw a few punches into his back, but it was as if I was punching a frigate with just my bare fists. He threw a backswing with his right arm, and I ducked under it, throwing a few more blows into his stomach. The hit still didn't faze him. He grabbed me by my armor and threw me at William, who he heard rushing him. We collided with each other, and both of us got put on our backs. We quickly shook it off and got up, ready for the next move. I said, "If he wants a fight," and William finished the sentence with, "Let's give him a fight." He did that same move where he bridged the gap in the blink of an eye. First, he went for me, but William started putting punches and kicks into the side of him, forcing him to block both of us. William and I were going blow for blow with the legendary Horseman of War. Not one of us was getting in a single mistake or advantage on the other. If he was going to go for a grab on one of us or something, the other was going to ring his bell. Soon enough, we had him on the back foot. Oh boy, we were getting real fucking tired of how evenly matched this was. William said he was going to try to pull out the restraining bolt he packed, but then the horseman filled with this immense rage, gaining a huge portion of his stamina back. William and I were on the either side of him, and we both decided to back off for a moment. I taunted him, and I let him rush me. I told Will over the comms that we were only going to get one shot at this. I ducked and dodged around the horseman and made sure to position myself about 10-ish feet in front of William, ensuring the horseman couldn't see what William was doing. He turned around, pissed, and rushed me like a bull. And he was about to dive for me when I moved out of the way again and allowed William to throw the armor restraint at the horseman. With William's precision, the restraint hit him right in the visor, and he proceeded to slide on the ground up to William's feet. William had the audacity to say, "That was easy," and I replied,
Speak for yourself. Those hits were no joke.
We looked down, and the restraint started to pulse a bit. The horseman moved. I said to William,
You saw that too, right?
William said, "Yep," and started to back up. I asked William if he had another restraint, and he said no. I started to back up, and the horseman began to move more. He was somehow fighting the restraint. I said,
Come on. We just want to help you.
Then the horseman spoke.
Just leave me alone!
I looked at William for a moment and then told him,
Look, we understand you. No, you fucking don't!
By this time, the restraint was still on, but he was on one knee. He was struggling, but he was putting up a fight like we had never seen. I took off my helmet and made sure to turn off my helmet's microphone so that Oni wouldn't hear what I was about to say. William turned off his microphone too and looked away. I then told him, we know what happened to him. We know exactly what he lost, who he lost. This is where that intel from earlier comes into play. See, William and I couldn't help but wonder why Oni was so obsessed with finding and bringing back such a legendary asset, especially dead or alive. Hell, how they even lost him in the first place. So, while we were gathering intel to find him, we had an unofficial look into the horseman's history. We followed the trail and found both Brian G505's official and unofficial files. In the lovely unofficial files, we discovered the mission he was sent on, and everything that occurred on that mission. Turns out, he was set up by Oni, and the Rear Admiral was in on it. That mission was designed to break Brian. Oni even faked being Covenant to warn Gargantum about his assassins. Oni is full of some seriously sick fucking bastards. They didn't even care about some of their best soldiers, using them as cannon fodder for their own selfish goals. This was Oni trying to turn Brian into their perfect soldier. But they didn't take into account he would go AWOL. Those people at Brenner's bedside were his family. On his original application into the UNSC, he lied about having a family in order to protect them from any trouble he might get into. Oni knew where they had been the whole time and brought them in to see Brenner. Oni made sure to pull the plug the same day as the family was visiting. And they made sure Brian saw it all. Everything was planned out by Oni. I stood above the horsemen and began listing their names.
Lance Corporal May Vanna. Lance Corporal Kane Riley. Staff Sergeant Arthur McLean. No. First Lieutenant James Brenner.
He stopped struggling. Had his head looking straight down while still on one knee, both fists clenched. He then filled the air with a scream that you could tell came from a place of torment and depression, but also almost relief. Relief that someone, anyone, finally understood what he was going through. It wasn't just Oni trying to get a weapon back, trying to use him as an advantage in a war that took everything from him. I told him that I'd been through hell. William's been through worse. And we knew just how much pain these wars had brought. We told him we weren't going to let Oni take him in. We had our own plans for him that didn't involve him being used as a weapon by Oni. I made the insane but trusting decision to take the restraint off and hoped he wouldn't punch me into oblivion. I must have done something right. Because he just stood up and began gathering things from around the battlefield, including a Spartan laser that had a bunch of tally marks carved into it. He then walked into the Pelican and sat down. William and I followed close behind. William sat across from him while I sat next to him. After a moment, William ordered the Pelican back to the Asunder. The ride was quiet, but I'd say more of a peaceful quiet. When we got to the Asunder, we headed straight to the bridge, with Brian by our side. When we got there, we reported to the captain, and the Oni officer overseeing our mission came in and asked what had happened down there. We told him that we simply talked to him, Spartan to Spartan. The officer gave us a suspicious look, but told us good work, and that he would take Brian from there. Brian looked at both of us and began filling with rage. I stopped him, and without skipping a beat, William spoke up, saying, "With all due respect, I can't allow that." The Oni officer grew a confused look on his face and said to William that wasn't his decision to make. William then said that he would like Brian to join us as a team. The officer looked shocked that we knew his proper name. The officer said that we wouldn't be able to control him, that he was a liability. Oh, William said one of the greatest comebacks he's ever said in this moment, saying, and I quote, "No, you couldn't control him. You couldn't even find him. We found him in 2 months and brought him in first try, sir." End quote. The room was silent for a moment. Then Captain Alona spoke up and told the officer that William had a very valid point. William then proceeded to say, again, and I quote, "Why not keep him with the 2 people that actually found him, so you don't lose him again, sir." End quote. Captain Alona grew a smile on his face and even chuckled a bit. The captain spoke again and said that William was completely right, adding that he would also assist in keeping an eye on Brian, giving us a wink behind the officer's back. Captain Alona suggested having a proper fire team on his ship for once. The officer was, visibly confused by what had unfolded in front of him and just shook his head. But with the officer being outnumbered, Captain Alona's influence, and William absolutely destroying this officer's confidence, we got Brian the help he needed. Turns out he hadn't taken his enhancement drugs or its stabilizing drugs since before the Roswell mission. The advancements in medicine since the war gave Brian a permanent solution to that issue. No more uncontrollable rage, no more attacking his allies, no more worry about the horsemen taking over again. It took him a while to trust William and I, but in the end, we showed him we're trustworthy and that we don't plan on going anywhere without a fight. That's how our team came to be. Well, how it began, at least.